this is Kynan Marlin. You can follow me at Twitter at KYNAN_MARLIN.
This is Jack Harris. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Harris38.
And today we're going to be talking about racism in sports. And it's a touchy subject. Most people don't like to talk about it, but it's still an issue today.
Yeah, well, I think one of the good things we've seen recently, Kai, is I think there's been, I know it makes people uncomfortable, but I think, especially in the last couple of years, we've seen more acceptance on a national stage and in the media of talking about these issues. Whereas before, I think, especially when it came to sports, people would ignore these kinds of things. And recently, if there's been a racist act or something along those lines that happen in the world of sports, it gets attention and people talk about it, and a lot of people are angry about it and want to see change, which I think is a good change from what we saw probably 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. One thing that I'm bothered with, though, is people still try to silence athletes, and you could see that through people just on Twitter and out in the open just saying, just stick to sports and don't talk about these issues, stay out of politics. And I think that's actually been happening all the way since, Muhammad Ali and, way back when. And they kind of, people hate these athletes when it's happening, but then after a few 20 years or so, they're really whitewashed and then kind of accepted in the community.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it does come down to either media members or fans where they believe athletes should be drawing the line in terms of making social statements and things like that. I think one of the things that a lot of it depends on is how notable and how popular an athlete is. Because I think at some levels, you look at a guy like LeBron James. LeBron James is probably as well known, if not more known, than more than just other athletes. But you're looking at pop stars and political figures even, where things that a guy like LeBron James says, and I know that he's been probably one of the more interesting athletes to look at when it comes to this subject, can really get people's attention just with the things he says. So I think for guys like him, it's important that if there's an important issue where people want to hear specifically from him, he doesn't just say, this isn't my place, I don't have an opinion on it, especially if he does. So I think for very popular athletes like that, it's important that they do express how they feel, especially when as many people look up to them as they do.
Yeah, LeBron never turns away from an issue regarding minorities, and I think that's really important within the world right now for someone to stick up for them, and I'm glad that LeBron's always there for them. And something troubling happened to the last Suns game I went to, actually. So I was sitting back rows, obviously, and it was nearing the end of the game, and this fan behind me, who was this white fan, probably about 50 years old, was just sitting there complaining about one of the international players on either the Bucks team or the Suns team. I think it was the Suns. And she just kind of went on a tangent about how, he's not even that good. Why is he taking jobs away from, potential U.S. athletes? And I don't know, it just made me really uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, I think no matter what you do, you're going to get people who go to games and talk like that. I think the hypocritical part is that's probably the same type of person who will go to a game, say those kinds of things, and then when an athlete makes a statement or a stand that's opposite of what they feel, they're the ones who come out on social media and are like, well, you're an athlete, you can't be saying this, you can't be saying that. Come on, you're a fan, you can't be saying that.
Stick in your own lane.
Yeah, if you're a fan of the game, and really that's what it comes down to, especially in sports. I think if you're a fan of the game, it shouldn't matter what race you are, what country you were born in, what your background is, or what for the athletes. If you're really just a true fan of the game, it shouldn't matter. What should matter is how those athletes perform, if they make the game entertaining, if they do things that you just kind of look at and are mesmerized by. And that's the thing for me, that when it comes to sports, there shouldn't be these lines, because the way we judge athletes isn't based on race or ethnicity or gender. It's based on what can you do athletically to help a team or in an individual sport, to be successful.
Right, I agree. Coming up from El Paso, I just never looked at race when especially when playing like a basketball game or a football game, it was just always, oh, I want the best person on my team, or like I want to play with this person. I mean, I don't think racism is nearly as bad as it used to be in our generation. I mean, it's still there, no doubt, but definitely was never there for me in sports. And I really like the new Nike commercial with LeBron, Serena Williams, and all those athletes. And it basically just says within these lines we're the same, but it can't just be within these lines. It needs to extend outside of sports.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that society can follow sports in is, it doesn't matter who the person is. What matters is what they can do and what they can bring to whatever walk of life you're talking about. But then it brings up the other issue is, unfortunately, not everyone's going to see it that way. We saw an incident earlier this year in the ASU U of A game where Torian Graham was getting allegedly called racial names from the U of A student section and then went and flipped them off, which it begs the question, these athletes are because they're on a public stage and because of just the world that they live in, they're subject to these types of things that normal people aren't subject to. How much space do you give them? How much freedom do you give them to kind of express themselves and to talk back or make actions against those people who are using derogatory terms or things of that nature towards them? And at what point do they just need to forget about it, move on, and say, we're not going to be able to change it?
Right. I mean, the more we talk about it, the more I think it'll go away, like generation through generation. But I mean, how many years ago was the Marcus Smart incident where he got called something and then went and beat up a fan in the stands? I mean, this is just going to keep happening. I'm just glad that it's kind of dying down. Like, I can't remember, but historical athletes from the NBA always talk about the N-word and how it was used against them whenever they went to stadium, and they just ignored it. Obviously, it's a little different now, but I mean, you just gotta keep talking about it, and hopefully it'll go away.
Yeah, and my view on it is, I think, especially when it comes to the way fans interact, and when you put fans in a stadium environment where they're passionate, even if they don't mean the things they say, they seem to think it's more acceptable to say derogatory terms or something like that, or it's okay to say it because I'm just a fan, I'm just being passionate. Oh, I didn't really mean it that way.
Yeah.
So I think the more that players ignore it and don't respond to it and show that it's not getting to them, the better. Because I think what most fans are trying to do when they say those types of things is they're just trying to get a rise out of a player. They're trying to distract their focus. And I think if you're a player and you can ignore it, they're going to realize, okay, this kind of these kind of attacks aren't working anymore. Which hopefully would be a way to get that out of the world of sports.
Yeah. I mean, same thing happens just every day with like most athletes, honestly. But last year it happened with Russell Westbrook in Dallas. One of the fans was saying something to him, and then Westbrook, it got caught on tape on his phone, and Westbrook just said, like, "Hey, shut the F up," and then the guy, even though he was talking to Westbrook and trying to rile him up, once he said that and then left, the security guard told the fan to calm down, and then he goes, he told me and my wife, like, to shut the F up. I mean, you can't get mad if you're yelling at these players, you're being passionate, and they're passionate right back at you.
And at the end of the day, I don't think that fan in Dallas is going to average a triple-double in an NBA season.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all we got today. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, no problem. It's fun.